let's start by looking at the advocacy from the ship owners in Germany, talking about carbon trading system. Now they're asking for proper legislation as regards, the EU agreement concerning carbon trading system. But first of all, give us a background to what this carbon trading system is all about and the essence of this advocacy.
Thank you very much indeed. Just yesterday, the German Shipping Association, VDR, Dr. Martin Kruger was saying that in the last 2 years, the German government, particularly in Berlin, has made some pronouncement in terms of our ship owners should be able to reduce carbon emission. So a policy framework was put in place from Berlin, which is escalated into the European Union and Parliament. But then the ship owners are saying that yes, they are willing to comply, but the phasing in terms of percentage reduction in emission, if it's not consistently done, because shipping is vital to global trade. So they want a regulatory framework that spells it out as quickly as possible so that they can calibrate that into their own policy framework. I think that's the background. So what their demand is not that they don't want to comply to those regulatory framework, but that there should be a high level of consistency so that they don't pay certain amounts at certain time, another amount up till about 2045. So they want a clarity in terms of the framework, which was agreed within the lower parliament in Germany. But then the EU has a global framework, so they want clarity as quickly as possible so that they can key into that in terms of their operational planning. And by the way, Germany is the 7th largest in terms of ship ownership, particularly container ships. They have over 1,800 container ships, and they've been serving the global world trade with us. So they need that clarity to be able to plan their future in terms of how they will face their own. And the International Maritime Organization said that ships generally across the world emit about 3% of carbon emission, and that's they need to get into that fray to see how they can resolve that issue as quickly as possible.
All right, so the carbon trading now for countries that many of them are wanting to go into, what's it supposed to achieve and how does it benefit even the countries economically?
It's just the major plan in terms of climate change action to move from, to go into a renewable energy transition. And this agreement has been put in place, but then it should be done in phases. So the benefit is that even ships that are producing about 3% carbon emission will find a way to get technology-driven items to reduce their emission by going green. So in terms of how they move and take their goods across oceans to meet various countries in terms of global trade. So that again is an ambitious plan by the German government. They're taking that initiative to see how they can control that. And the European Union has put a framework, so they need to quickly work that local legislative framework, domestic framework, which they can escalate to the EU so that that can be done as quickly as possible.
Now, making reference to the EU agreement of 2022, one will have expected, since that has provided a kind of legislation for ship owners, it will be easier for the ones in Germany, to be able to key into this. Why the struggle? If there's a legislation on the part of EU, there's an agreement, the 2022 agreement, and shouldn't it be been easier to have adopted that to create a framework for the ship owners in Germany?
No, that global framework in terms of maybe a regional, based on the European Union, that framework is there, but you need to domesticate
it.
That law there are some peculiarity within the countries that make up the European Union. So the ship owners are saying, yes, that framework is there. How do we run with the local framework? And this presentation was in concert with the Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, who made a presentation to the lower parliament in Germany, so that they get that clarity, and they need that clarity to plan their own policy framework, so they too can benefit from that framework. So I don't think is a problem. So even global convention, they even have another convention with the International Maritime Organization. So you need to demonstrate those convention to your local, what you call municipal law, so that you can work with those framework, because there are commitments that have to be made. So those commitments they might factor that into their financial planning and operational efficiency as well.
So from 2022 to this time, it's almost 2 years. Why do you think there's been some delay?
Well, I think it's parliamentary bureaucracy that people need to dot and cross some T's. So that framework is there, but when you demonstrate a law, there are some peculiarity that industry need to involve with. So if you don't provide that framework locally, then there's a challenge for those who are in business. And shipping is very critical to global trade. And Germany is one of the major centers when you talk about shipping in Europe. So they need that clarity to be able to do their planning, like I mentioned earlier.
Now, the EU agreement also requires that the ship owners should obtain permits, like a special permit, to be able to engage in this kind of venture. How significant is that? And then do you think that would be like a form of control on these ship owners to standardize the operation?
Yeah, that's the framework that has been put in place at the European Parliament. So to find a way to reduce that emission, everybody has to sign on into that policy framework. I don't think the ship owners actually have a problem, but what they want consistency in terms of the plan. So that plan that is universal, so to speak, across the European Union, and must find a way to get into local law, which those people can abide with. And they equally have commitment with the International Maritime Organization, which is an umbrella regulator for maritime and shipping.
All right, but one would think naturally that shipping companies perhaps will have no business with carbon emissions or carbon credits. What is the link?
But they power their ships, so they equally emit carbon. But in terms of the percentage of carbon release, it's just about 3%. So gradually they need new technologies as well, so that they can reduce their emission. And that discussion has taken place at the International Maritime Organization, at the European Union. So it just needs a clarity, and I think it's just a bureaucratic bottleneck in terms of how that policy framework can be put in place, particularly in Germany, which is a major service provider when it comes to shipping.
You know, I was listening to one of the ship owners, complaining that there's no draft bill yet. If you've had this kind of agreement 2 years ago, this is 2024, how difficult it is for a country like that to have a draft bill yet, and then what does that suggest about the bureaucracy? Is it becoming something that is creating bottleneck to the process? 2 years, you don't have a draft bill yet.
And that's the challenge, and that's why that association is crying and drawing attention that we have a global framework, IMO, we have a framework from the European Union, but when you come to local practice, that draft has not been put in place. So they are calling that draft should be put in place, so that this framework that has been put in place from the European Union in terms of 40%, 60%, 100% in the next 10 years to 2045, they need that framework to be put in place so that they can plan. So I think lower house, in terms of bureaucracy, should be blamed for the delay in looking at a critical sector which contributes a greater percentage of income to the German economy.
Would this be seen as paying lip service to the reduction of carbon emission if at the regional level, talking about the European zone, it has been agreed upon, but domesticating it is dragging?
No, I don't think it's a lip service. Germany, of a truth, is taking the lead in Europe in terms of the policy framework, taking climate change action. And Olashus, the current chancellor, has done so well in that regard. And you can recall that Germany is one of the major polluters in the world as we speak today. So they are trying to create initiative that will reduce carbon emission. They are actually taking leadership in Europe. So I don't think maybe there's an oversight in terms of that draft bill. The House Committee on that may be working behind the scene, but what is in the public domain is that you don't see a draft bill. Maybe the Shippers Association may not have been involved in the process, what you call public participation in terms of bill making.
Now let's look at the requirement from the EU as regards this. Says the EU wants vessels to pay 40% of their emissions this year, 70% 2025, and 100% in 2026. How visible is this?
Well, the European Parliament, they have done its homework. There will have been some public hearing, and that commitment, I think, will have been made by the ship owners, that association. So I think the issue here is that this agreement at the European Union level that talk about these various percentage timelines, but those timelines are not within the domestic framework. So you need to quickly pull those framework, and they may have some peculiarity that are unique to that country. Maybe that 40% that is proposed may not even be 40% that Germany will pay in the first instance, 75% and 100%. So, if you are able to domesticate that law, then that thing cannot take place. So, they need to quickly work around that framework so that it become a law, and you are able to put ship owners in check in terms of the demand that you are making on them.
What will be the implication of this demand on cost of doing business and even cost of rendering services when it is domesticated? Let's assume it gets reduced or stays at the same 40% emissions of their emissions from 2024, rising to 70% in 2025 and 100% in 2026.
The implications are just far-reaching. If a business operation is going to pay some money and is going to acquire new technologies to remain in business, the implication therefore is that as they acquire those new technology, the cost of the operation will be passed to those who use their services. And the implication is for consumers at the end of the day, we pay more. So I think that's the long and short answer to that. The buying public will eventually pay for that. There's no doubt about that, because the cost of operation to change the technologies that they currently use, the operational cost will increase. Then who take that cost?
The last consumer.
Yeah, the final is the consumer. So those who are involved in container shipment will transfer those costs. By the time they arrive at your harbor, then when you eventually get into the distribution process, then the consumer will pay dearly for that. So, and that's why they need that clarity so that they can put that into their planning processes. They may even have done that in their own stimulation, but waiting for the law to come through. So if they don't have that clarity, then it might be difficult to even get those percentage in terms of what you want them to pay.
All right. Globally, shipping accounts for 3% of CO2 emissions. And what do you make of the attempt to decarbonize shipping activities globally? How successful was that, especially in Africa, where we're battling with the issue of regulation and legislation?
But the major ship owners are not domiciled in Africa. They are domiciled in the industrialized world. So I think it's a welcome development. But again, just like any policy statement, any policy framework, it will take some time. Though there are timelines, 2045, 2050, you have almost zero. But then these are ambitious plans. But in terms of reality, this timeline.
Why do you say they're ambitious?
No, they're ambitious in terms of the fact that those countries telling you to reduce your carbon emission are equally investing in coal-driven technology, using other traditional means of energy, which are major polluter, major carbon emission-driven industrial world. Then in this part of the world, we're told that we must catch up quickly. But those investments, and that's why I say to a very large extent, is ambitious. Some of the climate financing option that has been involved in the last climate change conferences up to the ones that we just held in Dubai last year. Some of those options, those finance are not even available yet for people to take advantage of. And that's why I say to a very large extent is ambition, because they are still having massive investment. China still using coal, even Germany. So these are core
Even
issues.
India as well.
Yes, so, and they are making massive investment. And the percentage of emission from those industrial coal that they use is so much. So when you say by 2045, 2050, we'll have about 0 days, what of the transition, even the transition of 20 years initially, is not been sustainable so far. So in that regard, therefore, it might be difficult to achieve, but it's always good to have milestones that will put us on track in terms of strategic planning.
According to the VDR, what they said regarding the new routes that they had to take because of the crisis around the Suez Canal. VDR said that current diversions to avoid the Red Sea cost operators $1 million per tour, while the Black Sea situation has eased for German ships. But looking at the long route that they have to take, it looks like they're even going to emit more because they're going to be along that route for long, using more energy. That will further increase the percentage of carbon emissions from the shipping companies at the end of the day.
Precisely, and that's why they are asking for clarity in terms of a domestic law that will empower them. So when they are able to factor those percentages into their operational costs, then they might say this law, based on the current reality of the situation at the Red Sea and the Black Sea, and the issues of Russia and Ukraine crisis. So they will emit more. Therefore, they will pay more in terms of the percentage that you are demanding from them. But then if you don't look at their current reality in terms of business operation, then that law may not serve the interests of that country. And I think that's the call that they are making. That's good that you have a framework, but then we need clarity in terms of the local law for us to operate. So they may have their own submissions, their own proposal in terms of what you wanted to pay in terms of 40% for this year, 70 to 75% next year, and the other year. So, but the reality on ground, that demand is not realistic based on the challenge of operation, because they are even spending more money in terms of operation. So they are going to emit more, and then if you say they should pay those percentage based on the route that they are moving and they are spending more money, then it's going to jeopardize their business interests. So for a win-win situation, they may recalibrate some of those processes when they domesticate it into their local law.
Looking at the global efforts to achieve zero emission by the year 2050, the greatest opposition to that is coming from China, who is the largest coal user in the world, followed by India. How much of setback will that be towards achieving this target of 2050?
I mentioned earlier, and I use the word carefully, very ambitious policy framework, global policy framework. The point is you want to transit into using new technologies. And the values of those new technologies, you have made pledges globally that for us to invest, you need X amount of dollar to be able to move up to 2050. But then those investments are not coming in. And those who made those pledges are equally investing in old technologies that emit carbon. So the concept of international conspiracy and hypocrisy comes into fore when you look at India. They are firing coal. Look at China, even Germany, finding a way. So, but the pressure is on the global south to buy those new technologies. So they need those monies from us, when they create those technology before they start to see what they can do back home. And I think it's more of, if we use the Nigerian language slang, that's more of lip service into that ambitious plan. We need to move away, but then the reality on ground does not show speedily that by 2050, that zero emission will be achieved.
All right, well, what about the encouragement that some governments want to give to companies like Germany, for instance, launching bidding process for subsidies to support energy-intensive firms switching to green production?
Robert Habeck, that's Deputy Vice Chancellor of Germany and the Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, made this proposal in the lower house of parliament that for us to achieve the 2045, that's Germany's own initiative, to sustain that process, there's a need to provide some incentive amounting to about 4.4 billion US dollar to companies that are major emitter, looking at the glass manufacturing company and all that. So these incentives or initiative to some of this industry, there are money to be claimed. So if you are able to acquire new technologies, then you assess this is the initiative. It's equally ambitious, but I think is a plan that Germany has put in place to take a leadership role in terms of see how they can transit quickly. So the first phase of the project is about 4-point-something billion US dollar, which the companies will assess for the next 4 years to see how they can acquire new technologies to that effect. I think is a welcoming development, and that initiative will provide some answers to what Femi asked earlier in terms of how sustainable can we achieve zero emission. So Germany is taking the lead with that initiative. Let's see how that money gets to those companies and how quickly they can acquire new technology so that they can transition into green energy.
Now, if you look at the energy mix of most nations, you always have a combination of renewable and non-renewable sources, even Germany, India, and the big nations. Now, but the issue here is the transition now. How challenging will that be for these nations? And I also want us to look at what is playing out in Africa as well, whereby we're still depending on the conventional means rather than, the renewable sources.
Yes, for the renewable sources or green technology, the problem is, like we said earlier, there were commitments, global commitment towards providing funding for green technology, but those funds are not available. So the challenge for the energy mix will be there for a long while, unless those monies are made available so that you can transit into green technology. So that's a major one. Then on the other hand, Africa, as we speak, in terms of percentage contribution into carbon emission, is far less than the industrialized world. But they are pushing us so hard that we must go green. There's nothing wrong in going green. As they are investing and having a mix of that traditional and green energy, we as a collective, as a people, must equally take the initiative, do what they are doing, and exploit those traditional means of energy that we have in abundance here.
Wouldn't that amount to insincerity and then a setback for the zero emission that we're talking about?
No,
because I understand the
promoters, the point I'm making is that the promoters are equally abusers.
I understand.
So they're pushing you to go green, and when you go green, some of the technology you require to go green,
investment is there.
They bring in those technology for you and take your money. Then later they bring part of your money that they have taken to you in form of aid, and they say they are supporting your green energy transitioning. So the point I'm saying is that conspiracy, African leaders must be wise enough to say when you go into all those summit diplomacy where commitments are made, and at the end of the day, the funding is not coming, and somebody that is telling you that we even want you to arrive there earlier is committing the same thing.
Some commitments and
so that's the point. So we need to balance this international hypocrisy or conspiracy. The West does not have the true solution, even though we're blessed with a lot of abundant green technologies here, the sun, the wind, but we need to take this initiative. Thank you that we have a new set of law that will help us play in that regard, particularly in Nigeria.
If the West is, on one hand, advocating for zero carbon emission, and on the other hand, making use of the same fossil fuel and other sources of energy that emit lots of carbon, does that go to show that for now, there is no solution for green energy, complete green energy globally?
No, the green energy solution is there globally, but the rate of transitioning in terms of the timelines that the global community has set for itself may not be achievable. Then too, we talk about climate financing. There were commitments that were made. Those commitments has not come to fruition. Therefore, on one hand, I agree with you that that commitment may not be sustainable to some extent, but the green technologies are there. Those who have the opportunity to take advantage of those, even if they don't have the financing, even particularly Africa, we are blessed with abundant sunshine. Let's see how we can use that to our own advantage, pending when the financing. But my submission or my discourse center on the fact that somebody cannot be pushing you in one direction and they are committing same crime, in quotes, and they want you to go the other way. So the point is that we have abundance coal here. Let's be exploiting those coal, even in terms of what we have in the national grid. It's so small. So let's exploit those resources in addition to where we have opportunity for green energy.
Which brings me to the point. If we are to exploit the coal and other sources of energy available, which of course also emit carbon, and the world is saying move away from that, and they are also developing that, isn't it because what they have currently with the green energy, the advancement in technology, cannot sustain the operations of companies, of industries enough as with the other ones? For instance, solar, wind, what they are able to generate from it, the power that they're able to generate from it may not be able to sustain operations as it is for now.
is able to sustain operation when those commitments in terms of investment made into those sectors are valuable. So, because when you are transitioning from an old regime to a new regime, you need some amount of investment. And those commitments were made globally. But as we speak, those commitments are not on the table for people to assess. So, how do we progress, particularly on the global south, when we are struggling with energy? So, that's the point I'm trying to canvass here, that there's no problem with green technology, but you are telling us that we need to advance quickly, but then you are making some investment in those industries.
Discouraging?
So I don't see the balance in that. That's my own point of view. So we must take advantage of those. We continue to get to the level where those funding is available so that we can take advantage of that. But China can tell us that we need green technology here, make some commitment in terms of funding, provide scholarships to some institutions, and at the end of the day, you're firing coal to provide energy for your people. So we need energy here as well to survive.
All right. Now let's get back to these $4.3 billion green subsidy provided or as launched by Germany to encourage investment in green technology. Now, looking at the bidding process, what kind of framework do you think should be put in place to ensure transparency and to also ensure that this investment justifies the purpose intended?
No, I think in terms of that initiative, the framework, there's already a framework put in place. So if you are transiting, so if you are in glass manufacturing company, there's a percentage of emission that you're already putting out there. So you make a proposal in terms of how you're going to go green. Those transitioning, then the fund is released based on your ability to move from your old technology of production to new technology. So the process, based on the kind of environment that they are, that process will be transparent. Then if you go to another set of industry, the policy regime and the transitioning will be different from one industry to the other. So the bidding process framework will be designed based on industry to industry. And once you make some gain, then those funds are released. And I think there will be a window in terms of evaluation, monitoring, so, and you're able to get those incentives. For me, I don't see any problem in terms of the bidding process. So all the framework, the milestones will be there. So once you meet those milestones, the monies will be released to you. And I'm sure those companies that want to access those funds quickly so that they can change their operational processes and take advantage of those funding as well.
Well, let's look at the availability of the money for even the companies, because though Germany wants to become climate neutral by 2045, as we've been talking about since the show today, they also plan to award companies in sectors such as steel, glass, paper subsidies for their efforts in reducing carbon. But that plan was also put on hold at some point because they had originally planned to offer subsidies up to mid-double-digit billion euro sum. But the program was put at risk by last year's Constitutional Court ruling, stopping the government from using some 60 billion euros of debt for climate protection projects. So do you see issues like this being a hindrance to the monies eventually being made available and even the sustainability of this? If Germany that wants to be the forerunner in this cause is having issues like this, how do you see it happening for other countries around the globe?
And that speaks to the issue that we talked about earlier. You look at a country, Constitutional Court, trying to stop a massive investment in terms of borrowing to support a climate change action. And that is put on hold. But then, because they have made commitment to their people to win election, they are saying that by 2045, they want to stay neutral. But then, in spite of that challenge, they put some funding in place. that will help that transitioning process. And I'm sure that some other country, and particularly the global south, we don't have those resources. And you see the court is saying, don't borrow to finance a climate change action. But then this is the money that I've made available. I'm sure those industry, particularly the steel industry, the paper industry, and the glass industry, which are major polluters, will take advantage of those incentives that are provided. Because when they move into a green energy process, that will equally reduce their cost of production and operation as well.
Let me make reference to a statement credited to the economy minister. He said companies will be compensated for the extra cost of green production in industries where climate-friendly production processes cannot currently operate competitively. Is that a good incentive to?
It is. What that is saying, if I understand that correctly, is that once as a company, if you are able to just make investment into green energy, then
the extra cost.
That extra cost is that type of subsidy that will be provided. That means you are not transiting from old technologies, so to speak, to new technology. You are making investment into that. That will help exactly because the process of transitioning into a new scheme
comes with extra cost.
Extra cost. So, but if you are making investment directly, particularly you are starting a new operation, and you have that technology to fit into your industry, that's a welcome call.
So for companies that are looking to go into green energy, it seems like this is really good time for them to go all out into it.
Yes, but then you need a massive investment in that sector. Thankfully that Germany is provided the initiative. So companies that play in that sector within that economy will benefit massively. And at the end of the day, once those technologies are sustainable in those environments, they will transfer those technologies to other places. And the cost of transiting eventually will be cheaper for other countries, in my view.
So for Africa, particularly Nigeria, shouldn't it be cheaper to turn to green energy, being that some of the natural resources needed for this are abundantly available here?
But you don't have some of those technology, some of the component. You have the natural endowment in terms of green resource. But then the other input mechanism that you need to fast track those natural endowment. But then the resources are not there. So you still need that technology transfer from the global north to be able to take advantage of those initiatives. And that's why I say that conspiracy must find a way to get off the communication between the global north and the global south. So we need the technologies, we need the investment. You're talking about lithium, for example. We need investment here so that when you manufacture those batteries here, then the cost of providing solar for mini-grid use will become cheaper. But we equally need to rely on them because the level of development in terms of technology, we're not at par with them. That's of the truth. But then we have some other options. The Federal University of Petroleum recently won some prize in terms of using a composite element to generate electricity. So and that can be escalated into a commercial. They won a prize money in the UK recently. So those opportunities are there, but then the government should encourage those things so that those researchers can benefit from their research findings.
How do you think Africa can adopt the same kind of approach to investment in green energy, looking at the examples provided by Germany, through the European Commission?
The African Development Bank has green initiative. They have a desk that address climate change and climate change investment. So the government should take advantage of that window that you have at the African Development Bank. A big desk with some financial commitment running into billions of dollars for those who want to take initiative. And currently, the African Development Bank is supporting the Rural Electrification Agency in terms of providing mini-grids using green technology. So African countries should take advantage of those windows and make massive investment in those sectors.
So along the line of Africa needing technologies to actually make green energy available for it, despite of having some of the natural resources, isn't it a time to re-strategize using some trade agreements when the West come to tap primary products from Africa? Instead of payment in cash, should there be some arrangements towards technology transfer? Because it seems more expensive when payments for the primary products have been done, and then you want certain technologies, you have to buy the technology. It seems more expensive when you cross over to the other side. How can Africa strategically use what they have to get what they want?
I think we should just encourage massive investment in Africa rather than taking our primary products away. Let's bring some of those technology here so that we can take advantage of those technologies. So you don't need to come and take my lithium. You don't need to take plenty of oil and gas. Just do some massive investment here where you can add to the value chain of those specific industries so that people can benefit in Africa.
Thank you very much, Sam Orovwuje, for speaking with us today on reduction of carbon emission. It's a global challenge. We do hope that whatever is needed, if it demands that some of the legislations that have been agreed upon at regional levels, maybe for Europe and even for Africa, can be domesticated, and then countries will work at saying that there is less carbon emission. We need the world, we need the earth to be safe for all of us to stay. We don't yet know how other planets feel like, if it will be very conducive like the earth. So the earth is what we have, we must preserve it. Thank you for your great submissions on the show today.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.